Hi, welcome back. Now, with people analytics, I get the question a lot about where do I start? And before I try and answer the question, I come back with at least a handful of questions because I cannot answer that question without understanding who that individual is, where they sit in the organization, what the needs are of their internal customers, what resources they have at their disposal, what data that they have at their disposal. So, what I would like to do in this segment is actually help you identify how to answer this question within your organization. And as you get it, then you can in turn uh, flex the muscle and practice asking these questions so you can better understand how you can move forward in your organization, even if you've already started a people analytics or workforce planning or similar process that, okay, this is our best next step. So when I get this question, this gentleman comes to mind. Arthur Ashe is one of my heroes. From when I was a child, I remember him winning Wimbledon. I was a very young guy. I remember the eloquence that he had when he spoke publicly. He wrote the definitive history of the Black athlete in America. He had done many things that from he contracted AIDS, if you likely know, and he passed away from contracting the disease through a blood transfusion. It's very tragic. I read his book when it came out, Days of Grace, which is a graceful, beautiful book in its own right. One of the quotes he's best known for is this: "Is start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can." I probably don't have to elaborate on the appropriateness of this idea as we think about most anything in life. But certainly people analytics and workforce planning and employee or worker experience, this is really, really important. We have to understand where we are individually and who and what's around us. And that is going to inform our best next step. So, how can we get visibility into the surrounding ecosystem or landscape? What I have long used is what I call the data to change process. And let me walk through this quickly. Every organization has systems and they have data within those systems. And to level set up front, those systems were selected and implemented more often than not to create or improve a process. They were not generated, again, more often than not, to generate insight for analytical purposes or generate data for analytical purposes. So that's a very important distinction. Oftentimes it's transactional data, and we're taking that data out and trying to do some cool stuff with it. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. And we're not going to go too deep into that because that speaks to ethics and privacy and the quality and appropriateness of the data, which we'll talk about in another segment. We take that data and we stage it. Stage it means clean it, align it, make it usable for reporting and analytical purposes. In other words, you put all data together in a data lake or something, it doesn't magically create the insight. It has to be structured in a way that is usable. That is a process that people have to do that work. Increasingly, machines can do it, but it has to be thought through. There has to be some logic applied. After that, we report out on it and we can do some basic analysis, often cluster analysis, which is effectively segmenting by different groups, demographic characteristics. Once we've done that, we can actually pull that out of those or similar systems, out of these BI tools, for example. And now we can do more sophisticated analyses with more sophisticated tools. These can be statistical packages. They can increasingly be these AI, ML related tools. But this is a level that where we're getting insight not only created in an automated way, but often distributed downstream to internal customers in the absence of human intervention. And we're not going to talk about the risks and benefits of that. It's just a reality of today. if we're generating insight through analytics, we still have to package it and communicate it. Again, data scientists and others now are creating the visualizations and prompts that help people actually not only become aware of certain metrics that reach a certain threshold, for example, but what action to take subsequently. So again, a lot of this is being automated. However, there are people who are doing this work in each of these pillars. So ultimately, there has to be a narrative built around it. How often have you heard, well, what's the story? That takes some crafting. It takes practice. You go, how do I package this deliverable? Is it 4 slides? Is it an infographic? Is it a 20-page deck? How does that story get packaged and in turn communicated downstream? Then it invites the question, who's communicating and facilitating discussion around this? And in turn, somebody takes action. So the organizations are creating knowledge, or at least they have the opportunity to create knowledge. Action is being taken. Oftentimes, there is the need to bridge the gap between knowledge or potential knowledge and action. We need to do this at speed, and we need to do this at scale. And if we're not thinking in this way, we're going to do this on a transactional event basis, and it's not going to be sustainable over time. So where are you individually? You might be a researcher, IO psychologist, for example. You might be an IT professional creating dashboards and doing reports. You might be a data scientist. You might be an HR business partner. You might be a business leader. You might be a data architect, a solution implementer. Whatever it is, you sit within this data to change process, and it is not only wise to know, it's essential to know who's upstream and downstream from where you sit. What tools and data do they have? What are their needs? How can you help facilitate this going from the data to insights and action? Because after all, those customers at the end of this, over to the far right, they can give rat's tail about what's happening to the left here. They just want the insights when they want it. Similarly, the technologists, they don't understand and see what's happening downstream oftentimes. Increasingly, they are, and there's better connection. And that's what our role as people analytics professionals, we need to understand the whole data to change process, not only connect the dots, but connect the people within this process. And how do we do that? We do that through governance. We actually put together a group to understand this, talk about it, prioritize. So hopefully this has help you understand, where do I start? It's going to depend on where you sit and where there's others adjacent to you, so you can actually learn and in turn take the appropriate action to get where you want to go. So we're going to speak more about this notion with Dan George right after a short commercial. Thanks for being here.